Laelen, welcome to the Off Shift Podcast. Good to see you. Tell me a little bit about you, your career, your path, and then we'll kind of get started on the questions and all that stuff.
Yeah, so I'm a Spokane native. Was born here, grew up over on the Idaho side, but visited frequently for family. So this is my area. Kind of didn't mean to get into EMS originally, but it's where I ended up, and I love it now. So I started out at a small volunteer agency, kind of got my feet wet there, and then not too long after got a full-time job in private EMS. Did that for 6-7 years or so, and then got hired on full-time at a fire agency.
Heck yeah. So how many years total so far in EMS?
I'm at like 8, 9. I'm getting in there.
Sweet. Awesome. So you kind of fell into EMS, right? Wasn't really like in the cards. Like at what point did it like really set in that like, this is your life, this is your career, this is where you're going? Yeah.
Yeah, so I was one of those people who thought I wanted to be a cop initially. The issue is I didn't really want to be a cop.
Thanks for not
I wanted
doing
to
that,
get into law enforcement, and then realized like the pathway there was just not aligning with my view of how I wanted my life to go. Worked some odd jobs, and then my mom is a 911 dispatcher, and so she was able to hook me up with a ride-along with the fire department back where I grew up. And from that first moment I went on the ambulance with the boys, I was just absolutely hooked. Took an EMT course not long after. And I think I kind of have this theory that you never really know what you're in for or what an experience is like until you get there yourself. So I was like, wow, this is exciting and I want to do it. But I think within the first year, I really knew like, yep, this is my spot.
Sweet. Heck yeah. So what is it about EMS that like specifically spoke to you or hooked you or you were passionate about?
I always had a little bit of a hero complex, which we know that you don't get to be that all the time doing this. Like we are well aware at this point. But I like the problem solving, little like medical Sherlock Holmes, you know. I'm really good at pattern recognition. And so I can walk in and look at a patient and look at vitals and their history or even like the environment they're in and kind of start piecing things together and see what I can do for them.
Heck yeah. So what did you think, like you have a little bit of background, right? Mom being a 911 dispatcher. What did you think EMS was before you kind of got started? And then now looking back, 8-9 years later, you're like, hey, I was right. I was wrong. I was close. I was not even in the same playing field.
Yeah, I don't think I had a super warped Hollywood version in my mind. I always knew that wasn't quite right. It's not like the movies. I think one of the things that probably surprised me and that we all get to know doing this is just the systemic issues that you see. Like it's not just the emergency call or the not quite emergency call that goes to 911. It's everything underlying. It's the medical system in general. It's the area you live in and what resources are available and what aren't available and how people just, they don't really know how to cope and they don't know what direction to go. And you're the guy that shows up.
Yeah, I like that. So you worked private EMS and looking at your location background, like small town EMS, right? Mm-hmm. Like so not very big.
Not very big.
So you've worked small town, you've worked big town, right? I guess we'll call Spokane a town. You've educated students, you've been a field training officer. Now you're on the firefighter paramedic side of things. So how have all of those changed the way you look at EMS as a profession?
It's really cool to have the broad scope. Like you said, started small town. So I remember when I moved from small town to full-time bigger town, I thought, I'll never see a frequent flyer again. That doesn't work.
Yeah.
I kind of learned that people are kind of the same everywhere in a way. Not to like diminish it, but they are. You see the same patterns. People have this idea that small towns are safer and that there are less problems. I think they're swept under the rug better. I worked some of the gnarliest calls of my life in the smaller areas rather than the bigger, like the car wrecks, the like drinking and driving,
right?
You know, epidemic basically. So you do see like some cultural shifts and just like mentality of the area itself. I think the variety has made me a better provider for sure.
Yeah.
You kind of mold yourself to the area you're in a little bit so you can serve the people there better.
For sure. All right. So we've kind of talked about your background, right? So now we get into this because this episode talks about the black cloud.
Oh, yes.
Right? You have definitely, and I know you a little bit, you definitely have the black cloud magnet stuck to you.
Yeah.
So what exactly, like, what things earned you that title? Like, is it a title you gave yourself? Is it people around you are like, I can't work with Laelen today because she's the black cloud? But yeah, kind of unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, I did not claim that for myself. That was definitely bestowed upon me. It really started when I was in medic school. So I feel like my EMT experience before that, I had a good variety of stuff, but the true black cloud, the lightning didn't strike yet. I had a partner while I was in medic school who was already known for being a black cloud, and it seems like since the moment we partnered up, mine just took off. I wasn't allowed to share my calls in class before anyone else had gone. Like, everyone else had to share their calls that they'd done for the week before the instructor would let me say what I had done. We'd have some of my classmates be like, I guess I worked a call on thinners this week, and everyone would finish sharing, and they'd look at me and go, all right, what'd you do? And I said, well, I ran 8 normal calls that I don't remember. I had a shooting that turned into a traumatic arrest. And then I had a motorcycle wreck that was another traumatic arrest, and a stroke that rolled his car. And that's not even an exaggeration. That was a real shift we worked.
Yeah.
You know? So it's just these calls that land, and people in EMS like to talk. And so everyone wants to hear the story. And so the talk kind of got around. And then when I started teaching students and working as an FTO, people would get excited to roll on my bus because they knew, like, hey, I have a good chance of seeing something today.
Right. What's that reputation like from the other side?
You know, it's I hate to say fun. Fun seems like the wrong word because you have these things that are happening that are inherently not fun for the people involved. But I think we all like to use our skills, and I know I definitely do. Right. So it gave me a chance to really grow as a provider really fast once I got my medic cert, because I really didn't have a choice. I was getting hit with all these calls where it's like, you're going to sink or swim, and I decided to swim. So I took pride in that for sure. Yeah.
Was there a specific call that you can remember thinking, like, this for sure would happen to only me? Like, this is what I do.
I think, okay, so it's just an example of how the black cloud goes in general, and an answer to that question. My very first night out as a paramedic, fresh cert, working a crummy night shift, I got held out late and then caught a cardiac arrest. And we worked the whole gamut on that. And then less than 2 weeks later, I had a call. It was like a shortness of breath, difficulty breathing. And I showed up on scene, and the other crew from the other agency I was working with on that call, they were real sleepy because it's the middle of the night. And they're like, yeah, this guy, I guess he's sick. He's got cancer. And I put him on my monitor. He's in straight up VTAC, like the most shark tooth VTAC I've ever seen. I'm like, well, y'all missed this, and I'm about to shock it. So like it's a story I tell pretty often because just the way it played out, no one on scene expected it. And I was like, yeah, that kind of tracks for me. You know, like
that's about right.
That sounds about right.
That's awesome. So you kind of already talked like a badge of honor, right? Because you, again, I think with the same mindset is we want to be challenged, right? Yeah. But at like, does at some point, does that like mentality of, oh, this is just who I am. Does it stop being fun or funny? Or like, have you had those moments where you're like, okay, like I'm all done? Yeah.
You know, I mean, there's the very mundane version where you just have a long day and you're like, I don't want to write another report. I mean, I've had those days where it's not even anything overwhelming. It's just like, geez, I am tired. Can we turn down the knob today? Like, can we quit this? And then on the more extreme side, you know, you hit a point where like you are proud of it. You've got this reputation. On the positive side, because you have this reputation, people believe in your ability to run these calls and they think you're a good partner to work with. But then you reach a point where you're like, oh, that one actually sucked. And people still want to hear about it. And people still want to ask questions and pry. And when you've been so open about the other ones because it was fun, it's really hard to pull back and be like, not this time.
Yeah. So obviously like that humor side always is so important to us, right? Like I feel like it's how most of us cope, at least in that immediate like piece. So, but when does that piece start kind of getting in the way of avoiding of what you're actually starting to feel? Like when you're like, hey, that call actually isn't cool. Like that's just not one of those calls that you want to share. And then so of course someone, wants to pry, or, hey, how was your shift? Or, hey, in this town, it feels like everyone's like, oh, hey, I heard you went on this call. Like, I got to know more. Right. And you're like, maybe you pop a joke or maybe you don't say anything. But like, at what point, like, does it become a way of avoiding like what you're actually feeling?
I mean, I think avoidance is the key word there. Like you said, we all use it to cope. I think we have a lot of really funny people in EMS. It's like a job requirement. If you are having fun with it and maybe you're just having a casual conversation and it's not striking deep and you're not trying to dodge something, I think it's okay. And I think it's a way we relate to each other. And it's actually a very cool thing at times, even if people on the outside don't understand it. I think when you reach that point where you are trying to avoid, you're trying to sidestep, maybe you're changing the subject with it. I mean, changing the subject's fine if you don't need to talk about it. But when you're talking about it in this gallows humor way because you can't face the reality, that's when you need to check yourself.
And you're going to go into that, right? We're kind of like, we're kind of easing into that piece. I did almost forget. So we have this guy, his name's, we call him Smooth Operator Soapco. I'm actually wearing his shirt because he gave me a shirt. But he is a local police officer and he gives gifts to all of our guests.
Oh, wow.
So this, I wanted to give this to you. So this is brand new. He just dropped the EMS line of his soap.
Very cool.
So it's beef tallow soap, all natural, like all that good stuff. It smells really good. He's got a fire line. He's got a police line. He's now got this EMS line. But that's your gift to you. So I almost just forgot. And he would have beat me. He would have just absolutely just like been so mad if I would have forgot it. Yeah. And I'm wearing a shirt. How I almost forgot. I really have no idea. So let's kind of start venturing into like that burnout side of things, right? So sometimes we're going to talk about personal burnout, right? But one of the things you wanted to kind of talk about and unpack is like there is bad calls, but then there also is the other side that a lot of people don't want to talk about, which is like the bad culture, right? So sometimes it's not always the calls that burn people up. It's the environment that they're in. So what's the difference? How does someone recognize the difference between burned out by the job and burned out by the culture that is surrounding you?
Yeah. So obviously, like, we cannot control the calls we go on. We also can't control certain things about the agency we work for, regardless of what that agency is. When you're in a place where there are leadership issues or management issues, maybe crew issues, you and your partner, you and your crew as a whole, and you're not getting along, and there's this attitude of, I don't want to, or like an issue with work ethic or integrity, like these things just start bleeding in. And that has nothing to do with the call volume or the calls we're going on directly, but it eats away at you even more because it's a more direct hit, but it's also kind of insidious. You don't notice it. You notice when you go on a big shit show of a call, but that attitude from your coworker or that pressure from management, it's eating at you little by little, day by day. And so it's almost like that frog pot analogy. You throw a frog into boiling water, he's going to hop right out. You let the water simmer while he's already in the cold water, and he just stays and doesn't notice the danger. So I think that's kind of the difference between the two is you notice and expect one. You really don't see the other until you start seeing the issues down the line within yourself.
So do you think a good culture or a good, strong crew or a connected crew makes super hard and difficult calls more survivable, easier to deal with, easier to unpack?
100%. I mean, I've worked a few within this last year that, I mean, they could tear you to pieces depending on who you are and the environment you're in. I worked a whole family fatality on Christmas this year. I worked another
Black Cloud.
I'm not lying. I worked another like really horrific freak accident with a pediatric that resulted in death. That's actually got some notoriety, even not just locally. That was also just a really terrible call. And I have such a supportive crew and supportive chiefs and admin that like those things have not hit as hard as they might otherwise, because I know that I'm taken care of. I know my crew has my back. I know my chiefs have my back. They check in on me. Like, it's a really good environment to be in. So I'm not already in that place of burnout where those hits hit even harder.
That's so good. So have you been in a place like personally, right, where you've realized it's not an EMS problem, that it's an environment problem? Like, was that a time in your career where you were like, it's not just the bad calls, because those keep coming, but it's the environment that I'm in?
Oh, yeah. I have like the big overarching bad call, right? I think if you've been in this for more than 2 minutes, you have the one you think of when people start asking that sort of question. And again, the call itself really sucked. It was a horrific situation, but it was the aftermath of the call. Like, it wasn't the fact that I had a patient who completed suicide. It wasn't the fact that she died in my ambulance. It wasn't, the feeling of helplessness even in that situation. It was the way it was handled by some of the people I was working around after, and some of the like company type issues that played into it. I went back in service not back in service. I went out of service after that call, because me and my partner were both like, "Whew, this was real messed up," and came into who was supervising their office at that time, and the first words out of that person's mouth were not, "Are you okay?" or "What happened?" or like, "Hey, I saw you go out of service. What do you need?" It was, "Well, what could you have done to prevent this?" And I was like, dude.
That's how we're starting this?
Dude. And I mean, when I say like everything went wrong from start to finish, we were over 45 minutes away across the entire county from a known overdose, like intentional overdose to complete suicide. That was the whole thing. And it was during rush hour traffic. And there was, just not many ambulances available is why we ended up in that position. But then, I felt that there were some perhaps dispatching errors. There were other units that cleared that didn't go, and maybe they could have got there sooner. There was a hospital that didn't accept our patient, even though it was a situation that bypasses divert, which was still a thing at the time. There was the doctor who was angry we brought it to that hospital versus the other hospital. There's like all these little things just tick, 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 and it's like everything that could go wrong did. And then I walk into that office just looking to solve problems, and what I get is, "You messed up." And that hit worse than everything else. It was like, I'm trying to figure out what just happened, and I don't think it was me. But now that you're saying it, like, the doubt starts coming in.
So why do you think people go to that? Why is that? Because you always hear like, we have to stop this suck it up culture, right? But then that seems like to me that's the equivalent of suck it up, right? Is like, well, I don't know why you're upset. Clearly you could have done something to change this trajectory, right? So why do you think people still have that in their brains? Why is EMS still all about the like, why are you not back in service? Like, what do you mean you're upset about a bad call? Like, that's your job. That's what you signed up for, which is complete bullshit, right? We have proven time and time again that contributes to burnout, suicide rates in EMS, like just terrible, terrible things. And yet that seems to be at the forefront of people's tongues when you walk in and you have that look on your face like, "I'm not okay."
Yeah.
Their response is like, "Okay, but go back on the street," or "What did you do wrong?" or "How can you make this better?" So why do you think that's still a response?
I think there are a couple things that play into it. I think there's like a historical, like cultural thing. EMS, fire, law enforcement, first responders in general, historically very masculine field. And historically, and even currently, we're really bad at letting men show emotion. And it's not necessarily even just emotion in general. You hear like not to get into like political or feminism, like anything in there, but like women are hysterical, women are emotional, men aren't. Men are, but you guys are allowed to show anger. That's where we let men show it. If you show any other sort of emotion other than anger, then it's weak. Anger is strong. Any other emotion is weak. And so when you are in this masculine field where that's acceptable, but this isn't, then we're kind of guiding how people react to things and what they're allowed to show, and how that comes out when they do have an issue. So I think there's that. I think people have an inherent discomfort with just people showing emotion in general. Like, I don't love when someone bursts into tears in front of me. Like, I feel awkward sometimes. I try to handle it better.
Yeah.
Like, okay, every time. But you know what I mean? I think there is an inherent discomfort when someone is having a bad time or they're emotional in front of you. And I think most of us don't always know how to handle that. So it's really easy to sweep it away, especially when we're in this field. We're supposed to be tough and we're supposed to handle our own mess. And then I think there's an element of like compassion fatigue as well. It's not just the field crews, it's also supervisors and stuff, because they've been in our shoes at some point. A lot of them, I feel, have left the field because, you know, they have the opportunity to promote, but it also removes them from some of that compassion fatigue. But it doesn't really go away if you don't address it. And so then it just translates onto the crews.
For sure. And then I mean, I don't know about you, but also I feel like the training that goes into promoting, right, of, okay, so how do you handle the person that walks in your office and says, this is the call I just ran? There are trainings and education that goes into how to properly handle those. Seems like the only thing they ever read is exactly how not to handle those, right? Which is what they tend to go with, right?
Right.
Because I feel like sometimes that's how we almost handle it, like on the bus, right? You like get back in the bus and you're like, damn, that was wild. What could we have done different? It's like your AAR, right?
Yeah.
What happened? What went wrong? How are we going to not do it next time? And then we just move on. Well, AARs are great. Those are not like replacements for CISMs, whatever word you want to use, whether it's CISM or whatever other program. But AARs are not a replacement for mental health for our providers, right? And I think that's the problem.
They both serve a purpose,
100%.
but they're a very different purpose.
Very, very different. Yeah, AARs, like right now, let's look at the black and white, the protocol version, the whatever, standard operating procedures. But then in 48, 72 hours after all that has gone out of your brain, now it's time to start like, how do we look at the mental side of things? So, so how much responsibility do you think leadership has for the mental health of their people?
I mean, I don't like to put a number to things necessarily. Like my brain went 50-50, and I don't think that's right necessarily, but I do think it is a shared responsibility. You have to be responsible for yourself, and you know yourself. Leadership's not always going to have the best view on you as a person because they have to have an overarching view on everybody. So they have to handle more of the systemic and resource-driven areas of that. You have to deal with the personal, and you even like personal to the point where like you're looking at your brothers and sisters and you're the one on the ground with them who can see how they're doing. But if leadership is not aware of kind of the logistical issues that are causing stress, then it's going to be an overarching theme that affects a large part of their workforce. So if they're ignoring those issues or blind to those or hear about it but aren't willing to do something, that's where leadership's dropping the ball. And then having resources available, because if you do see those issues but you don't have any sort of solution or ideas for where to send people when they do need help, then that's a whole other stop to the system, and that creates its own issues.
So what are some of those issues, right? So what are some red flags, right? I mean, you've had quite a bit of years of experience, so you know what were your red flags? So what are things that if a supervisor is listening to this podcast, they can be like looking at their people from the 10,000 foot view and being like, okay, here's some red flags in this person. There's red flags in this person from your own personal experiences.
Mm-hmm. I think regardless of where you work, again, we all like could immediately think of a person when I say this where you're like, that is a cranky, angry person all the time, right? Like maybe that's just how they live. They roll out of the wrong side of the bed every single morning. They're a salty old dog. Like that's just, we all know, that's so-and-so and they're grumpy, but we love them.
Right.
When your hard worker starts being that person, that's a red flag. Like, you know who your problem children are. We all know who they are. When your people who put in good work have a behavioral change or there's a change in their work quality, that is an immediate red flag. That's the part you can see from up top is, wow, they normally always write excellent reports. They normally always clock into work on time. They normally follow protocol, follow SOPs, whatever the case is. And all of a sudden, those things are slipping consistently. Not one little issue here or there, because we're all human. But when you start seeing that slip repeatedly with someone, it might be time to check in. And it might not even be anything work-related. Maybe it's something at home. Maybe they're having a health issue. Maybe they're not getting sleep. But you can see where they're starting to slip if you're paying attention.
Right. So now let's transition, because that's a perfect segue, right? From that's work life, right? So now when the black cloud, the shit show, the shit magnet, whatever you want to call yourself,
all of it
starts to transition like home, right? And I know you have a passion for this of wanting to share these things. So when did you notice that the stuff at work was starting to like leak itself into your home life?
Yeah. So I think at this point, 2026, we're all aware of PTSD as a thing. We've all heard different stereotypical warning signs and symptoms and stuff. But I do think, again, not to like bring back a word from earlier, I think it's a little insidious the way it sets in. Like you can know you're on that bad call, and then, you know, like maybe I'm funky for a couple days afterwards. But for me, I was just freaking irritable at first. I mean, like, I am not an angry person typically, but it's like every little thing was just striking nerves and setting me off. And so I noticed that at home more than work. And then also just like this feeling of anxiety. And I guess you could call it hypervigilance is what that kind of plays into as well, where if I was at work, I was very, very task driven, and I was here for the job, and I was happy to be doing things and using my hands and using my brain and working hard. And I can be a work dog forever. I will keep mushing, you know, but then I would get home and have to slow down, and it felt even worse. It was like, I can't sit on the couch and do nothing, or my brain is eating me alive. And then that starts wrecking your relationships, you know? And for me, I wish that had been more of a conversation with the person I was with at the time, because I think if we could have talked about it more, then maybe it would have been a little bit more obvious to me exactly how that was presenting at home, because sometimes we're really bad at looking in the mirror. So I knew I felt bad. I didn't know I was presenting as bad.
Right. So obviously your like immediate like spouse noticed, right? Did your family around you notice a difference in you?
It's a little tough because a lot of my family lives outside of town. So it's not like I'm living in a house with a bunch of people, or even
Thank God, right?
like, I know I grew up that way.
Yeah.
I love my family. If you listen to this, love, but I really like having my house to myself. So the people who would probably be most perceptive about that were not physically close to me. And so it's really easy on a phone call or a text or a Facebook post to present whatever kind of picture you want. So no, I really don't think they were, but that was also my fault.
Right, for sure. So how do you explain that, right? So let's say it's just a general friend. Maybe someone's listening to this and they're right in that situation, and they have that outside friend, because I feel like our job has two types of friends. We have our EMS friends, right? Where we go out with them, we're talking about work, we're sharing calls, it's all whatever. And then you have your other friends who we should have other friends that are not in EMS, because that's your time to get away. But how do you communicate what you were feeling, what you were dealing with to those people who don't understand EMS? So maybe, again, someone's listening to this podcast that has a loved one that's in EMS and fire, and they're the spouse listening to this being like, oh my gosh, I think that's my other half that's doing this. How do you explain how you were feeling, what was going on? And then, of course, we're going to transition into like, what did you do? How did that whole like healing piece work?
Yeah. I think from my own personal experience and like listening and reading other people's accounts, whether on the first responder side or like the spouse family side, I think it's pretty normal for us to be like fatigued when we get off shift, you know, especially if you're working longer ones, 24s, 48s, that sort of thing. Like a lot of us want to just settle down for a minute when we get off. We don't want to go be super social and might be a little bit withdrawn. And I think a little bit of that is fine. We need a little bit of recharge. When you notice that is not just that getting off shift time, it's playing into daily life. It's lasting longer. Maybe your loved one shares that they have hard calls. Maybe they don't. But if you see they come home from work and they're just, I don't want to say distraught, but maybe more withdrawn than normal. Maybe they are distraught. Maybe they say like, hey, today was a really rough one. And that doesn't go away. So like when we're teaching like peer support teams, when we're teaching critical stress management teams, we talk about like, hey, it's pretty normal to feel like shit for 48, 72 hours, an amount of time after something happens. But when you start getting into, okay, it's a week. Okay, it's 2 weeks. That's when we need to get extra help. So if you see it's not going away, that's something. If you notice their sleep patterns change, like a lot of us are kind of bad at sleeping to begin with, but if that's even worse, or maybe they're normally bad at sleeping, but now they won't get out of bed. Like now they're sleeping more. Any significant change there, appetite, that irritability, again, I think that's a real thing for a lot of us when we get into this mode is like, okay, everything is setting you off and it doesn't normally. Like, your people, when you see one of those changes, like that's not their normal MO. I think it's time to start paying attention.
So that's kind of like the immediate change, right? So what does cumulative exposure to trauma and these bad calls and just black clouds, what does that look like as it compiles of call after call? Now it's week after week. Now it's month after month. Now it's agency after agency. And now it's a career and you're 9 months or 9 years later, right? What does that look like over like a long period of time?
It's really hard to not have your worldview change. When you see like the worst parts of humanity or just like tragedy after tragedy, even if it's no one's fault, it's easy to lose faith. Whatever faith means to you, whether it's in, a specific religion or the world itself or people as a whole, it's hard to not have that eat away at you over time. And I think that can make people really jaded. I think that it can kind of harden them to the world. They might have a harder time expressing emotion. They might have a harder time with like emotional intimacy. And you'll see that kind of trend. So like, yeah, you might have the immediate symptoms that we just talked about, but over time, it's more of this like broad worldview where things just kind of turn a little darker. So
who you were at the start of your EMS career and now who you are, right? Those two people, are they friends? Have they changed? Are they even close to the same person anymore? What does that look like?
I feel like I've been through a couple lifetimes, to be honest.
Yeah.
To be completely fair, I was not friends with myself before I was in EMS. Like, I had my own struggles before I was ever in the field. I had my own very legitimate traumas I went through as a younger person that I had to overcome. And I think that getting into EMS, I thought that was a Band-Aid for it. Like, I thought almost if I can go do something good, if I can fix other people, then that's part of fixing myself. And there's something to that. Like, it feels good to go out in the world and do something is worthwhile, but you can't rely on that to fix you. Like, you have to do the work. So looking at that person beforehand, looking at the bright, shiny new EMT and the paramedic who was so excited to get her cert and go out and use these new skills, like, I'm really excited that we made it. Because there was times where I thought we weren't. And looking at that paramedic who thought she wasn't going to make it, I can be really upset at where I was at, but I am in a place now where, again, I'm glad we did make it. And it's like, hey, you had a hard time, but we're okay. We're doing this. We're still loving it.
Yeah.
So I try to look kindly on the past, even if it's really like some dark and shitty spots.
Right. All right. Quick timeout. Don't touch the dial. This podcast is brought to you by EMSconnect because EMS education shouldn't end when the tones drop. When you join EMSconnect, you get access to real-world education, engaging courses, live discussions, and a community built by EMS providers for EMS providers. No fluff, no check-the-box training, just practical knowledge you can actually use on every single call. Let's be honest, most first responder gifts are pretty forgettable. Another coffee mug, another shitty, cheap keychain, you pretty much already know the drill. But here is something different. If you've never heard of beef tallow soap, you're not alone. More and more people are paying attention to the ingredients in the products they use every single day. You already think about what you put in your body. Have you ever stopped to think about what you're putting on your skin? At Smooth Operator Soap Company, they handcraft premium beef tallow soap made for firefighters, EMS, law enforcement, and the people that support them. No gimmicks, just high-quality soap that's earned nothing but 5-star reviews. If you're part of the EMSconnect family or a listener of the Off Shift podcast, use the code GETLESSDUMB, all one word, to save on your order. Again, that's GETLESSDUMB, all one word, to save on your order. And hey, if you're enjoying this podcast, rate, review, and share this episode and our podcast with all of your EMS friends. It helps spread the word of what we're trying to do here, and we greatly appreciate all your support. All right, now back to this episode. So this is that point where we get a little deeper into the dark and shitty spots, right? So you can share as much or as little as you want, like in these next couple of things. But what did rock bottom look like, right? Because obviously the person sitting across from me now is in a far better place than they were.
Thank goodness.
Yes, absolutely. So was it a call? Was it a situation? Was it an environment? What was it? And like, what did that look like?
It was a mix. It was all of that. So I referenced a call earlier, right? And like I said, we were across the county. It was a young woman who was my age. She took a bunch of beta blockers, and for any of our BLS providers or other people who might not be aware of what that means, if you overdose on these, they're going to stop your heart. They will slow it to the point where you will no longer have a heartbeat. So hearing what she had taken, I knew immediately this was bad. Like, I clued in immediately to like, ooh, if she actually did what the notes are saying she did, we're in a bad spot already. And we don't really carry an antidote in the field. We carry a little bit of medicine that we can use and not enough to counteract it. And so it started with the anxiety of, I am too far away to do anything. And then we got on scene, and I mean, not to like entirely trauma dump the whole call, but I think it's kind of relevant to see how it played out. There was an ALS crew on scene when we arrived. They said she was just talking to us, and when I walk in, she's in seizure. And so we scooted into the ambulance. We started going code. We started working on her airway because she was now vomiting with a seizure. So we were giving her meds for that. I was working on the airway there. It was my first failed airway. I've never had a failed airway previous to that. And so it's like I said, literally it's like that dream where you're in high school and everything's wrong and you're in your underwear in front of the class. Like, everything is just horrifying right now. Failed airway, had to go with my backup. And then she codes. And you know, if you're an EMS, we don't like people coding in our ambulance. People don't die in our ambulance. So we pulled over briefly to get another ALS provider in who was in a nearby engine. We kept on going. Like I referenced earlier, one of the hospitals in town rejected our patient while we were en route when we tried to call in a report. And we're doing everything we can, you know. And so we get to the next closest hospital after that, and the staff there is already worked into a frenzy just hearing what's come in. Very, very shortly after, they call the code. She's gone. And I remember walking out into the ambulance bay next to the other paramedic who had been on scene prior to myself. And he's a very, very good provider. He's very cool, calm, and collected. I've run other calls with him, and he punched a wall. And I was like, yeah, I feel that. I didn't physically do it, but I felt it, right? And so it was just this awful, awful call. And played out in basically all the worst ways it could have. And I was still a young enough provider. I think I was in my first year as a paramedic still. And I'd had a lot of successes. That was the thing. The black cloud, I had a lot of success. Obviously, not everyone lives, but the ones who didn't, it was like, they were dead before I got here. Or I knew they were going to die after I dropped them off, because that's the way this disease process goes. This was the first one where it's like, oh, she died on me, like in my hands. And so that was tough to deal with. And then we addressed kind of the management issue afterwards. And then with some discussion between me, my partner, and that supervisor I brought up, they promised they would look into some of the systemic issues that I thought led into this happening. And I learned after the fact that he never did. Never raised it up the chain. There was never the investigation. I checked in and was told like, yeah, we're looking into it. And I learned after the fact from someone else in administration that it had never been brought to their attention, ever. So not only did I have this awful call and I felt terrible about it, and I'm now doubting myself as a paramedic, which is the thing I'm most proud of, you know? Now the place I work for, I feel like I can't trust. And so it's like every little pillar in my life is starting to fall. And then I go home and I have my life partner. You know, I was engaged at the time. Spoiler alert, we didn't make it to the wedding.
That's that Gallows humor, right? That's
Right,
the laughing
like,
about things we probably shouldn't laugh about.
I always joked about how I said like I'm never going to be the paramedic who gets divorced. I never had a wedding, so
Right.
Mission accomplished.
Yeah.
So then it started coming home because I felt so awful about the things that were happening at work that, you know, like I said, I had that irritability. I had the sleep issues. I was stressed and I gained weight, you know, and I always had this like perception that like, oh, if I'm struggling, my partner's probably struggling, right? And so I did try to check in with him and to do the relationship things that I knew you're supposed to do and communicate and all that. And the fact was that I had a partner who wasn't willing to meet me there and who was super proud of having a first responder spouse up until the point where my issues became visible. And that's something that we can't help, right? Like we all hope to have that supportive person in our life. I thought I did. I didn't. And to be fair, I was not a pleasant person to be around. Like I know that. I am so aware of that at this point. But I was also just struggling and I didn't know where to go. General mental health system, I was trying to get help. I was trying to get in to see a therapist at that time. Everywhere I looked, you could not get in. I was put on a wait list for 6 months and told good luck. That was the best answer I got at that point in time. And so I even struggling and trying to get the help that I knew somewhere in my head I needed, I was still just seeing closed doors. With some of the stress and the issues I was having some like dysautonomia type symptoms. So, you know, like dizzy spells, near syncope, blood pressure issues, high heart rate, etc. Found out it was literally all related to my stress because I fixed some things in my life. It's all been gone for years now. I was taking beta blockers to combat that. So now I'm looking at this bottle of pills every single day that is the same kind of medication that this patient overdosed on. And that did something to my head. Like it very genuinely messed with me in a real way. So all of this circling back, what is rock bottom? Rock bottom was looking at that bottle of pills and being about to take it.
It's huge. Well, first off, thank you for like going there. I think providers that are willing to do that is huge. So kudos for you for sitting here and unpacking that. You talked a lot about the stuff that was visible, but what were there things that you were hiding from people? Were there still things that you thinking, doing that you just weren't willing to share with people around you?
Oh, 100%. Like on one end, I had undiagnosed OCD. I had no idea. It'd been there since childhood. I've had different symptoms over the years, and I didn't realize until after all of this, when I got into a really good therapist, actually, that I'd had this underlying condition the whole time. And so I was having these super intrusive thoughts, and they're very cyclical in nature, and they can go nonstop for hours. And I was so scared of telling anybody that because of what I've seen in the mental health system, because I've seen what happens when you admit to things sometimes. And especially being in a job field like this, I didn't want anyone to not trust me at work. I didn't want them to know like the really scary thoughts that I was having. And think that I was incapable of doing the job or that I was a danger to myself or others or, you know, anything down those lines. And so my coping mechanisms were really shit. I was drinking too much at that time and I was functional. I showed up to work on time. I did my job. Like no one except my partner who was also drinking too much at home would have known that I was drinking too much and he was in on it. So he didn't care. I mean, I get home from work and he'd hand me a drink.
Right.
That's just the way it went. and just super, super destructive thought processes. And none of it ever saw the light of day. Like, not a bit of it. I didn't admit to those intrusive thoughts and things I was having until a couple years later with that therapist that I was finally able to get into.
What was the hardest part about being honest? So it sounds like that therapist was who you finally opened up to and were able to just kind of share everything, right? Be extremely vulnerable.
Yeah.
But what was the hardest part about being honest?
I think it is just that fear that things can be taken away from you. Am I going to lose my job? Are you going to misread what's happening and try to put me on like an involuntary psych hold? I think any of us who have struggled in this field, because we see what happens to those people, like, it is a legitimate fear. And with the kind of intrusive thoughts I was having constantly, it's like, yeah, that seems kind of legit right now. That seems like a real possibility. And so I had to build a rapport with someone where I could be like, hey, I am safe right now. I need you to not like take this for something it's not, but I gotta say some shit. Like, I need to tell you what's going on in here because I don't have anyone else I could say this to. And so luckily I had built that rapport with this therapist, and I was like, it's gonna sound real weird. It's gonna sound a bit not good, but we gotta talk about this. And she did take it in stride and ask the questions she needed to, right? But we were able to work on it.
So those were your perceptions. So what was the actual cost of vulnerability for you?
I do think you have to have a little bit of like an ego death with it. Like, you have to realize that whether it's other people's perception of you or your perception of yourself, like, you have to let that like, I'm above it all, or I'm tough enough to deal with it on my own, or just like that fear of letting your guard down and letting someone else in so that you can heal. You have to let it go. In the end, when I was finally able to open up and start getting those things to see the light of day and do better as a person and heal and work on myself, the cost was not that great because the benefit was so much greater.
That's huge. So why is it? So you kind of mentioned a little bit about being vulnerable, right? But why do you think we as EMS, like, we could sit here, we could probably have a podcast and just talk blood, guts, gore, broken bones, cardiac arrest, gunshots, stabs. Like, we could probably just go on for hours and hours and hours. But yet this is the hard conversation, right? So why do you think that is? Why is it that EMS can talk about death and dying when it's not us?
Because it's not us. Because we are super, super content to be fixers for other people. Physical issues are not the biggest issues. I mean, obviously, dead is dead, right? We've seen the horrific traumas. We've seen really, really sick people. We've seen the cardiac arrests. And there are things that we can physically do in front of us to help this person. When you start talking about feelings or vulnerability or mental health, like, that is not tangible. It's not something I could put my hands on. It's not something that I can flip a switch and it's better, or give a med and it's better.
There's no protocol for that one.
I wish there was,
Yeah,
know, like, streamline this shit. But it's not something that there's an easy answer for. And the answers are going to be different for every individual person. And you have to really like kind of cut yourself open to let people see what's going on to fix some of that. It's hard, like it is.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about vulnerability, right? I think there's another component, right? Which is like, there is part of this job that is like, you need to be tough, right? Like, I truly think that we need to have some like thick skin.
Yes.
Right? So what does being tough mean? If it's not, like, it doesn't mean you can't have feelings. It doesn't mean you can't cry. It doesn't mean any of that stuff.
Right.
So what does it mean? If it doesn't mean that, which is what we've been force feeding our students for how long, right? What does being tough and resilient mean?
I think that toughness or resiliency, any of it, I think that it's being willing to do what you need to solve the problem. So if that is in the moment, setting your personal emotions aside so you can deal with this patient, in the moment, that is tough. After the call, facing those emotions is tough.
Hell yeah.
So it's whatever you need to do to face the problem at hand. And that is a broad spectrum of things, right? Issues with your partner on the ambulance or your crew on the engine. Sometimes you gotta, it's tough to bring up an issue with the people you work with. It's tough to bring up issues at home. It's tough to go do some super badass medicine. It's whatever the current issue is, being willing to face it.
That's so good. So what did you do and what did you change to start becoming tougher and more resilient in your career?
So I did have to trust people, right? Because it's really easy to isolate when you get into those low spots. And, I had people in my life who cared about me and people who I cared about. But I didn't really have the belief that they could accept me where I was at. And I had to just get past that. And either they were or they were not going to. And so in that deepest, darkest moment we talked about, holding a bottle of pills in my hand, first of all, I have the best dog in the world. That's probably not where you expected that to take a left turn. My dog literally came up and bopped my hand with her nose. And I went, oh. And it was this startling moment where it just pulled me back to reality long enough to pick up my phone, get a hold of two of my closest friends and go, I'm not okay right now. And one of them talked me through it because they could not physically be there. The other one physically showed up to my house, took every medication out of my house, took my firearm out of my house, and was like, what else do we need to do right now? And so they made sure that I very legitimately physically made it through the night. And then we were able to take steps the next morning. So having that trust in other people was super important. And once you're past a dangerous point, then you can start working on other things. I've realized both in my personal experience and in working with other people in crisis, if you can make it through the night and wake up the next morning, half the time you're out of the danger zone. It is those super impulsive moments that get to people. Make it to the next morning. Look at the sunrise. Figure out what you're going to do the next day, what your plan is. And for me, it was making sure that I could take care of my dog, making sure I was still talking to those friends, making sure I got in to see that therapist, started processing things in therapy. I got into EMDR, which if you have the opportunity to do that, to deal with PTSD, is almost like witchcraft, but in a really cool sciencey way. Very, very helpful in processing those events. And it helps you change the way you think about things. And I think learning about EMDR and how that reprocessing contributes to neuroplasticity essentially and reforming those pathways in your brain made me realize some things I needed to do in my daily life. So I've come up with this hokey little system I call the 3 Gs, right? And basically I started with gratitude. Because gratitude out of the 3 of these is the easiest, I think, when you're having a hard time. You don't have to be grateful for everything, but pick something. I'm grateful that even though I don't feel like I can get out of bed today, my bed's pretty comfy. I'm grateful that my dog's here. I'm grateful for a cup of coffee. I'm grateful that I have a job, even if I'm a little mad at it right now. I just pick something. It doesn't have to be a huge thing. Just pick little things that you can realize you're grateful for. Say it out loud. Post it online. Today, I'm grateful for this really good sandwich. It can be the little stuff, but give yourself those reasons to be grateful and start changing your mindset towards a more positive direction. And it sounds hokey, but it starts helping because you're literally changing the way you think on a daily basis. And then once you're able to start practicing that gratitude, then you can have some grace. You have to give yourself grace. You have to forgive yourself for the places you've been and the ways you've coped when things were hard. Because even if you coped in a really bad way, you were still trying to cope. You were trying to protect yourself somehow. Maybe it wasn't the best way, but you can accept that you tried. We're going to keep trying, and we're going to try in a better way now. And I say gratitude first because grace is really, really hard when you're feeling down. It's hard to feel like, yeah, I did all right, I guess, even though it doesn't seem like it. And then once you're having gratitude and you're giving self a little bit of grace, then we're in a place where we can have growth. You can seek growth opportunities, whether that's in therapy, whether that's in finding a new hobby. Maybe you need to look at your job and whether or not this is the place for you. Maybe you're going to take a class. You're going to read a book. Again, it doesn't have to be some crazy life change. Read a book on leadership, a book on, personal growth. on trauma, whatever it might be. Gratitude, grace, growth. I think those were the 3 big themes that I was able to change the way I thought little by little, day by day. And eventually it felt less hard.
That's so good. That killed all like the whole like get through the night, right? Which I love. See the sunrise, and then gratitude, grace, and growth. Like solid work. That's awesome. So before I give you the lightning round questions, which you don't even know are coming, if there's somebody listening to this podcast right now, right? They're in the bus, they're at home, they're driving home, whatever the case might be, they're struggling, nobody knows around them, they've never said anything to anybody. What is it you want that person to hear from you right here?
Whatever you're scared of and saying it out loud is so much less scary than the alternative if you don't. So say it. Say it to a therapist. Find if there are resources through work. There's like EAP and different things like that where you can get in for free even. Through a lot of agencies offer some help in that regard. Say it to a therapist if you're too scared to say it to anyone personally. They are professionally obligated to listen to you and not judge. If you have friends that you can trust, if you have a partner or a crewmate at work that you can trust, if you have someone in leadership who you have a good rapport with, just say it. You don't even have to spill everything immediately, but say something to someone that you can trust in some way. Start the conversation. Even if you start in a subtle way, it's better than holding it all inside. And I hope that will lead you to a pathway where you can continue to make decisions to better yourself in your life because you're worth it.
That's so good. Thank you so much for sharing. Like you probably don't realize like the amount of people that need to hear like your story, where you've been, where you're going, where you're going to continue to go. So thank you so much. I got 6 questions.
Okay, I'm prepared.
And you're just going to answer them right off the cuff, like no preparation whatsoever. And I didn't even let you see these, so you have no idea what's coming. So you're ready for this?
Yeah.
There are 6 of them. Okay. Number 1, one book every EMS and fire provider should read.
Ooh, I really, oh my gosh, one?
Just one book.
Okay. I'm going to go with Daring Greatly by Brene Brown. So this is not inherently EMS related, but on the whole topic of vulnerability and courage, it addresses all of that. And I'm going to cheat a little and say a second one. She also has a book called Dare to Lead. So if you're in a leadership position, you could like same sort of topic in a different light.
I love it. One thing every EMS and fire provider should stop doing.
Ooh, I don't love the salty culture. Like we all get a little salty, but I don't love the perception that it's cool. Like you walk in, you're like, I hate everything in my life and my partner and my ambulance. Like it doesn't help. When we're talking about mindset growth, right? If you can make a change, stop saying the negative things all the time on purpose, like it's a badge of honor.
I love that. If you could erase one phrase from fire and EMS, what would it be?
Oh no. Can we say quiet? The Q word?
Oh, come on now. Oh, man. Yeah, you can't say that. That could be your one phrase, just using the Q word. I like it. So fill in the blank. EMS needs more blank.
Ooh, EMS needs more. Ooh, that can go so many directions. Oh, lightning round is hard. Yeah. Vulnerability. We're just going to go with that. We're going to keep it right there.
And then there's the other side. Fill in the blank. EMS needs less blank.
EMS needs less. Trying to like make it concise. EMS needs less. I'm like trying to say like, how do you say like shoving it down? Like less repression.
Yeah,
We'll go
I like
with
it. Let's go with that. Last one. What do you hope people remember about you when your career is over?
I want to be remembered as a paramedic who loved her job and loved people. And did her best to make both better.
That's so good. Well, that's all I got. That was so much fun. Thanks for having me. Thanks so much for hanging out. I greatly appreciate you. Enjoy your gift.
Yeah, thank you.
Of lavender, eucalyptus, and charcoal beef
Smells
tallow
really good.
soap. Thank you so much. And I can't wait to. Now you're like you're not even in the same county as me anymore, which really sucks. Because every once in a while I need a good call to challenge me, and if you showed up, I knew it was going to go there. So I greatly appreciate it, and thanks for coming.
Thanks, Sean.